I'm going to start with a quick video that we shot mainly last spring when there was a performance in April with the New Mexico Philharmonic. There was a symposium in the fall of 2016. There was a museum conference where me and Professor Cecilia Lopez Chavez and Megan Jacobs kind of spoke on behalf of the Honors College. And this is a video kind of detailing the experiences of people with the project and just where we're at right now. So hopefully this works.
I think for me it was the chance to work critically on a text that no one else had worked critically on at all, just because it hasn't been published yet.
It absolutely come to life. We're bringing his works back into the world.
And to be the first one to only have worked on this was really kind of great for me, because I'm used to working on texts that everybody works on all the time.
I had never done anything like this before, and then I had to learn a lot of things about written music that I didn't actually know before, especially things that were particular to music in the 19th century.
Overall, I'm very excited to be able to give this product back and to let this music once again be played and heard. And I feel that this process has been unbelievably important and is successful because of that we are able to put on this performance and to let the world have this music again.
But as Still Today is being currently presented, it is a huge university event now.
I'm very excited about Sunday. I can't believe a whole symphony orchestra is going to be playing music that we were just sort of flipping through and hoping we would find something. So the fact that that's going to be there, there's going to be a whole exhibit to go with it, and everybody else is going to get to see what we've been sort of doing in dorm rooms and library carols for several months now, is really great.
I love this program. It's fantastic. I love the privilege of recreating this music, all doing something that's happening now for over 100 years and actually making it reality again.
Great-granddaughter of Manuel, Areu, overwhelmed and filled with joy and pride. You see the tears, that's how I feel deeply connected, and it feels awesome to have everyone here.
People of talent, and we heard these stories about how the family was talent, and after a while when we were teenagers we think, oh, you know, they're just exaggerating. But today I saw that it was not an exaggeration.
Yeah, so that was prepared for last semester. For those of you who don't know Manuel Areu, which is probably everyone because no one knows who he is a composer and musical director, theater performer, actor, director, stage crafter, costume designer, just all around general performer. I was born in Madrid in 1845 and then immigrated with his family to Cuba and Mexico and kind of toured around that area during both of those countries' revolutions around the turn of the century. They specialized in zarzuela music, which is kind of a precursor to our modern musical, so one-act opera, basically. And he had an amazing life. He composed a number of pieces that to this day are kind of seen as guideposts in the zarzuela genre, and not a lot is really known about him because after his family moved away from the Mexico-Cuba region, they moved to America, and the collection of manuscripts and scores and documents that he had been carrying with him his entire life were left in a dumpster in Jerome, Arizona, where they were recovered by an artist in 1957, I think, and donated to UNM. And so they've been in the archives at the Center for Southwest Research for the past 60 years or so, and not a lot has really been written about him. In 2012, I think, Javier Lorenzo started the process of going through these old scores and preparing them for modern performance, which you saw little clips of from the New Mexico Philharmonic last year. Yeah. So it's really, I mean, it's a pretty incredible story. I recommend going to the blog to check it out because there's a lot of stuff going on that. My independent study that's been going on with Javier Lorenzo for the past 3 semesters, as Dr. Donovan said, really centered around changing my conceptions of the editors of music, because I'd never done that before, and basically what we had to do was take these old scores and documents that were crumbling apart because they were not, preserved all that well before UNM got a hold of them, and trying to make sense of them in today's modern musical environment. A few things that I really took away from this is that when you're dealing with musical documentation, the work is not the paper. The paper is a representation of the music that could be made possible from interpreting that music. So it really gives the editor a lot of authority to see what is working, what handwritten little notes are supposed to guide the musician and the conductor through the piece, and to really understand how this music works, because it's not clear-cut just looking at the page. I mean, he had so many notes just written solely for himself to understand. It's really kind of complicated to get into that headspace and understand it. So I think that was something that I really took away from this. Kind of like what Anna was talking about in terms of contributing to a discourse. There's very few things published about this collection because it is so, I don't know, it's a very well-kept secret. There are 2 currently published doctorates on this, and I know Celia Lopez Chavez is planning on putting together a couple articles and possibly publishing a book soon. So it was really interesting to just have all of this information that only I knew, really. I mean, being the only student doing the independent study for the past 3 semesters, it's really been kind of all on me to kind of figure it all out and see what I wanted to do and say to add to the discourse. So, and there's not a lot of opportunities that you will get as an undergrad to do that type of stuff. So it was really important. And I think also just finding my own musical and professional agency as a thinker and as a person putting together materials. It was really kind of empowering to feel like my independent work was, moving the ball on this project. And there is that aspect of performance that happened in 2016. There's the distance between what I was doing and what performed on stage, which was just incredible to see that transition. Using musical text for research is really interesting, and I hadn't really thought about it before getting into this process, because there's a lot of little details about musical notation and scores that can tell you a lot about history. The piece that I was working on this semester specifically, Dr. Lorenzo and Celia Lopez Chavez actually went to Argentina to see if there were any archival research that would indicate that there were some pieces of Manuel Areu that made it down to Argentina, all the way down from Mexico. Because in one trombone part of this thing, there's a little inscription from a musician that says Buenos Aires and a date. So, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting things that can be kind of taken away from purely musical documentation. So the piece that I was working on this semester specifically was Cuatro en Uno, and it was written in 1887. And I wanted to show you a little bit of my process in terms of the documents that we work on. So this is the score for one of the movements, and as you can see, it's just kind of laid out there, but it's very, you kind of have to read between the lines to understand a lot. And there's a lot of things that went wrong the original time writing it down. So there's a lot of different notes that needed to be accounted for during the transcription process. And eventually it ends up looking something like this. This is a software called Finale, and we used it to digitally transcribe all of the notes and make sure that we could get a better conception to work with. The good thing about Finale that is really useful in today's transcription process for musical professionals is that it lets you play back everything immediately, so you can hear if something's wrong. So I'm going to play just a little bit. It's not going to sound very good because it uses the digital kind of sounds to just kind of like reproduce it, but this is what it should sound a little bit like. Or it won't. But that's okay. So during this process, we are constantly looking back into the archive and using Rocky Mountain Online Archive in conjunction with the Center for Southwest Research to compile all of these various different sources. Everything, he kept everything from notebooks and memoirs to scores and other people's zarzuelas to his own original compositions to little flyers for his shows and handbills and ledgers for like the bills that he was paying, like everything. He kept just a lot of material things to document his life. So it's really been amazing to just search through all of this stuff. And while in the middle of doing the transition from the score and the document to the Finale files, we also kept a series of logs that would document all of the various inconsistencies, I guess, between what the music was saying and what we thought needed to be presented and prepared for a modern orchestra performance. So yeah, that has been my experience. If you're thinking of doing, is anyone here thinking of doing any independent study undergrad? Yeah, if you're thinking about it, I would really recommend that you think about these questions that define an independent study versus a seminar, because it really, for me at least, has put a lot of things in perspective. It makes you think a lot about what you're learning, how is your knowledge applicable, because when you're in class and just kind of talking things out like it's great, but you're not really doing anything with it until you start your own, process. And so when you can find something that lets you make your own knowledge applicable to, the real world, so to say, it really is very empowering, I think. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the status of the project right now, because I am the only student currently enrolled, and I am not going to be enrolling next semester because it has been a little bit too long for me to be all on my own. But we do need new students, and that is really the thing that I think would help this project more, is if there is more people who are engaged in these texts, because that is really going to propel this project into being something meaningful. This is the only collection of Areu's music. There's no other collection of any of his music. This is the only place that you can have this experience, and it's really, as an undergrad, to have that research and archival experience, it's pretty important. There's very little written about the collection. Actually, next week on Monday, Celia Lopez Chavez is going to give a talk here at 3:30 about music and migration. So this is an example of how you don't really even need to have a musical background to be a part of this project, because Celia Lopez Chavez has done a lot of the legwork for the historical research needed to really understand everything, and she is doing a great job. She's awesome. There's ideas of publishing something soon on the work that has been done, and there are also plans for future performances, maybe. We're still kind of working through those details. Yeah, if you are interested, I definitely recommend emailing Javier Lorenzo at that email, or going to the talk next Monday for Celia Lopez Chavez, or if you're just kind of vaguely interested, we have a blog, manuelareuproject.wordpress.com, has a bunch of different stuff, like that video and these talks that Celia Lopez Chavez is talking about, and this was from last spring. So there's a lot of information out there if you're interested. So yeah, that's my presentation for the independent study that we've been doing. Any questions? Yeah.
How did they? You said an artist found his works just in a dumpster.
Yeah.
Why did this artist decide to recover them? What was the artist doing there?
He was a metal sculpturist, and he was looking in the dumpster for things to take back to his studio and kind of make art out of. And he found these giant chests that had music flying out of them, and he was like, whoa, this looks important. So he called his friend John Donald Robb at the University of New Mexico, who headed the music department at the time, and he kind of got the hookup going. So yeah, it's an incredible story. I definitely recommend everyone look into it.
And I would say too that Ben is exactly right, that this is a kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity.